The Story of Music in 50 Pieces with Howard Goodall and Susie Klein.
Howard Goodall, we're at the early 17th century now, and we've arrived at the music of a man who is a genius. That word is very, very much overused, but he's one of the most malleable, inventive musicians that there is. It's Monteverdi, and you've chosen a madrigal. What have you chosen and why?
Well, it's important that we realise that the word madrigal, which to a modern listener sounds like people pootling about going fa-la-la, the madrigal in Monteverdi's time, whilst there may have been a little bit of fa-la-la, in fact was the principal song form of his time in Italy. So it's a bit like saying he's a songwriter, really. And his madrigals are complex, sometimes long, sometimes very challenging, very daring in their musical language. They are really quite a thing. It's not someone dashing off a few songs. He did several books of madrigals, and calling them madrigals somehow reduces their power. Monteverdi is one of the few composers, I think there are fewer than 10 in all history, whose impact is absolutely seismic, right across music. He's one of the composers without whom progress would not have been made. There are some composers who are brilliant composers, who write beautiful music, but without whom probably progress would have just carried on. Monteverdi is the opposite of that. He's absolutely central. And the last piece we heard was a piece of Palestrina, just 40 years before this. It's like we haven't been propelled 40 years into Monteverdi, we've been propelled 400. He was so moved on style. And of course we can't talk about progress meaning it's better than it was before. It's just that things have changed. And the changes that take place in Monteverdi are enormous across so many fields. And in the madrigal, he shows how he's able to take harmony, which up until this point has been a relatively stable thing. You had your 4 or 5 chords, you moved around them, you came back to home again, you had a nice little cadence, you started off, and there were about, as I say, 4 or 5 chords any composer would use in a piece. He comes along and he says, oh gosh, no, harmony is much more exciting than that. We can have things that don't really fit together and create dissonances and clashes that create all sorts of ramifications in the music. We're going to create ambiguity in our harmony. He's so daring. The reason he's daring is because he wants the words to shock and stimulate you. And so he does things with the harmony. So if he's talking about cruelty, he'll do something with the harmony where the harmony goes to incredible dissonance, almost ear-splitting, for the time, of course. We're not talking about Stravinsky here. He does his dissonance in order to make you hear the agony or the misery in the music, and then he'll move away again from it as quickly.
And this is because essentially he's a painter of human emotions, and so the dissonance and the tortuousness is there to tell us about the human condition in a pretty forensic way.
Yes. I mean, there's one other composer of his period, Carlo Gesualdo, who's doing roughly the same kind of daring thing. But Gesualdo is so off the wall that there was never a chance that Gesualdo's experiments were going to end up in the mainstream. But Monteverdi is one of those very few people who, because of his genius, is able to bring radical components into the mainstream. And we'll see in other fields how he did this. But even in the madrigal alone, in the part song, which is what this is, he's taking incredibly daring risks with the harmony and getting away with it. And getting away with it is what makes these songs have the impact they have, because people think, gosh, this is really good, but quite a challenge to the way I'm listening. And to the people of the time, 1605-ish, hearing these madrigals, or singing them perhaps, because it would have been an amateur participation event, would have been about as modern as it's possible for music to be at any one time. Absolutely cutting edge. And yet, his sense of melody and emotion is so powerful, he's able to take all these risks, and you're with him at the end of it.